صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من اللعين الغوي الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين والحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف خلق الله أجمعين وخاتم النبيين ورحمة الله للعالمين، وهو أبو القاسم المصطفى محمد. والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الميامين وهم آل ياسين الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المقتولين المهديين الميامين، ولعنة الله دائمة على أعدائهم من يوم عداواتهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، قال الله تعالى في كتابه المجيد: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، فتعالى الله والملك الحق ولا تجعل بالقرآن من قبل أن يقضى إليك وحيه وقل ربي زدني علما. آمنا بالله، صدق الله العلي العظيم. We kind of took 2 days off, so we've got a lot of content to get back to. Shabi Ashur, we shifted a little bit to talk about Ashura, the importance of Ashura, and of course Yom Ashura is not the day, it's the day of Maqtal. So we've 2 days to go back to the content-heavy discussion, which is my style, if anyone has noticed that. It's a little bit different. So I ask you to be patient, please, with that, inshallah. May Allah reward all of you listeners, inshallah. You know, Ayatul Sistani says one thing which always reminded in the guidance he gives to Muballighin and the those that sit on the manabir or give speeches in Muharram or any time. He says, respect the intellect of the people who are listening. Assume that they are intellectual people, so respect their intellect. This is a very important point. Remember, it's not a place for just fantasies and things like this. The Agastani has clearly, said this. Anyhow, this is my humble effort. Allah knows if it's accepted or not, inshallah, to respect your intellect. Today's subject is the road to realization, how to be a human and learning how to be a Shia of Ahlul Bayt, versus the road to destruction and shaitaniyah. So there's insaniyah and shaitaniyah. There are two roads that we can take in life. Tonight and tomorrow, and we're going to do a little wrap up and conclusion. The good thing, we have a Q&A tomorrow too, so that'll kind of tie into the whole conclusion. So I do suggest Mu'mineen to come, because we've not really had an opportunity to have a Q&A over the 10, 11 nights. So it'll be great if Mu'mineen can come tomorrow, because I know some of them have asked for the list of books. I'll be sending that to Dr. Sadiq, inshallah, the list of, because I know I've mentioned a lot of books from the Mimbar. I've got more books here with me. I love to read, I love to source what I'm talking about, right? So Mu'mineen can go say, oh, well, that's what he said, this is where it's found, this is what it says, right? As opposed to just pulling from stories and things like that. Anyways, I'll send that list, and then all Mu'mineen can have the list of all the books that I've mentioned that are in English and available, so they can refer to themselves. So this supplication from the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him and his family, from the Quran is very well known. Rabbi zidni ilban. Oh Allah, increase me in knowledge. What an interesting supplication. Rasulullah Khuda is said, Qul, say, Rabbi zidni ilma. Of everything, the supplication of the Prophet is to seek increase in knowledge. So one of the things that I want to situate here, and I always like doing that as a teacher, maybe it's my habit, my teacher helmet comes on all the time, either I'm teaching in the university or in the classroom, I'm an educator. I like to situate my discussion, right? Which is, what is knowledge? And who transmits it? So what is knowledge and who is qualified to teach it? Or what does that mean, right? And truth and orthodoxy, where does that fit into this discussion? Orthodoxy means right thought, a right way of thinking, right? And where does truth and orthodoxy fit into teaching? There are certain people that the Quran describes. Ulul absar, ulul azam, ulul basira, on and on, all these different descriptions. People of insight, people of thought, ulul albab, on and on. The Quran is speaking to people of intelligence, people of discernment, people of a higher caliber. This is what Agha Sistani means, that when we're ascending the mimbar and we're speaking, the assumption is that the Hussainis and the Azadar of Hussein who are listening, the Mustami'een, are Ahlul Aql and Ahlul Basira. This is the assumption, Agha has said, Ayatollah Sistani. We assume that we respect your intellect because you are Ahlul Basira. You cannot be Husseini and not be from the people of insight. It's a contradiction in the two. This is Al-Marja al-Ala Sayyid al-Sistani, this is what he's assuming, right? Because the culture, the Husseini culture, the culture of Imam Hussein, of following in the path of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and what his uprising was for, and his stand, and going back to the Prophet constantly, going back to the Quran constantly, would require that the Azadar of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, the mourners of Imam Hussein, are people of discernment, not people of fiction and myth and things that are completely baseless. Right? And that's why Sayyid Sistani, he goes on to say that even the things that are mentioned from the mimbar should be referenced. He didn't say should be referenced, he said they should come from a reliable reference. So if a moment comes to you after and says, Shaykhna, Maulana, just curious, where did that come from? You should be able to answer that question confidently, according to Ayatollah Sistani. If you or I are coming and sitting here and speaking to you, I should be able to, and if I can't answer that question, I should be able to say, well, at least I heard it from a marja or a very reputable something. It can't be from nowhere, right? Doctor and I were just talking about this today in the car, and this is a very important point, and it comes back to what I'm talking about today, which is that the people of discernment understand that ultimately there is only one kind of knowledge that is of benefit to them. And that's ma'rifatullah. Everything leads to ma'rifatullah. Right? Everything, every road leads to the ma'rifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we have the ma'rifat of Allah, we understand as a community that the success of our civilization, the success of our community, the success of our family, the success of our personal life rests on the ma'rifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we're not developing that, then we have to ask ourselves that, is there a problem in our life, or maybe in the teachers that I have, God forbid, people who I maybe think are teachers. Rabbi zidni ilman. This is the dua of the Prophet in the Quran. That our community rests on this. And the ma'rifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rests on the notion that there is an unseen world. There is a metaphysical realm out there. That this physical body is not the complete story of humanity. There's an unseen story. There's an unseen world behind the makings and the things of quantum mechanics. I was recently reading a paper about re-examining the theories of the theories of Stephen Hawking's and quantum mechanics, and one of his students recently wrote a paper, a short article in New Scientist, A very important article written by one of the students of Stephen Hawking. Mu'mineen have heard of him, the very famous physicist from Cambridge. Right? He was in the wheelchair and he had a machine speak for him, right? That Hawking's, towards the end of his life, not that we rely and do taqleed of Hawking's, but this is just the point here, that he even admitted that with all our expertise in quantum mechanics and sciences, in however far we have gotten with the Hubble telescope, with all the technology that humankind have, it still doesn't answer fundamental questions about the universe. We cannot answer those questions. And that's why Einstein said again and again, science describes things, religion tells us what it means. Einstein was clear about this, Mu'mineen, from the beginning. Without religion, we don't know what it all means. Religion puts the puzzle together for us. Otherwise, science, quantum mechanics, all of this doesn't give you those answers. And mashallah, we have physicians here, we have doctors, we have professors. This is a very, highly educated environment here. We have other people from other institutions and other walks of life, but this is generally a very erudite people here. That science does not tell the whole story. And what's my point here? My point is that once we come to the conclusion that science does not tell the full story, now we become open to the idea that we want to figure out what we're doing in this world. Where are we going? Why do we exist? Why do we live? How do we live our life? Is it possible, rationally, that this intelligent creator, ultimately outside of space and time, brought us all here and just dumped us? With no meaning? It's not possible. It is irrational. And then you see these incredible human beings walk the earth, like the Prophet Muhammad, like Jesus, like Abraham, like Moses, and after them, so many amazing people. You have the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, and then you have later on, other people from even other religious traditions. Meister Eckhart, Rumi, so on and so forth. They're all talking about the same thing. That for example, I read this amazing book. I don't remember who it's by. This was during grad school. I took a course on mysticism, particularly Christian mysticism. I actually ended up doing part of my doctorate in comparative mysticism between Christianity and Islam. But one interesting thing I found out, this is a little nugget that you can take away from here. There were 3 writers writing around the same time, somewhere around like 700 years ago maybe. There was a Buddhist monk writing in Japan, I forget his name now. Then there was Meister Eckhart, the famous Catholic philosopher and mystic in Germany. And then there was Rumi. All 3 of them were writing at the same time, but they had never met one another. And all 3 of these points almost consisted as the epoch and the height of mystical, philosophical, spiritual investigation into existence in different corners of the world. Europe, Turkey, and Japan, simultaneously at the same time, coming to nearly similar, virtually similar, identical conclusions. What does that tell us about humanity? What does that tell us? From Japan to Germany, yet they never met one another. But they were all in a state of amazement at why they're in this world. And that there's a necessity to live life in a very specific way, so to honor the gift of creation and existence itself. What we say in Arabic, ni'matul ijad. I don't have time to go into, we could do a whole ashra just on that whole discussion. This is just very, a very introductory discussion. So now I will come to a different example. We have the best prophet, the last prophet. There are no A'immah like Ahlul Bayt. I'll give you an example, and you'll see where I'm going with this in a second. I met an expert of the Psalms, the Zabur, at Wycliffe College, maybe about 7 or 8 years ago while I was writing my dissertation, or maybe 7 years ago while I was writing my doctoral dissertation, I did a PhD, part of it on the history and the philosophy of Dua Kumail, and particularly the spiritual journey of the human soul from its beginning to its conclusion, particularly through the supplication of Kumail ibn Ziyad. Okay. So I was interested in comparing some of this mind-altering, incredible insights into human existence, philosophy, being, whatever you want to call it. Mind it, Mullah Amir al-Mu'min recited the whole thing in sajda. People would probably take a lifetime, maybe not in one lifetime, maybe in multiple lifetimes to summarize what he has done in one sajda on the 15th of Sha'ban. I don't know if that triggers here. A single sajda of Mullah Amir al-Mu'mineen summarizes the entire existence, the ups, the downs, the highs, the lows, every aspect of the bumpy road of human beings, from the moment they've entered this world to the moment they leave this world to the moment they meet God again. In a single prostration. Because Kumail says, دخلت على علي بن أبي طالب سلام الله عليه ورأيته ساجدا يدعو بهذا الدعاء. Right? The riwayah in Misbah says, Kumail says, I saw him in sajda. So I go and I meet this Christian scholar, expert of the Psalms. And I show him some lines from this in English. He looks at this, he tells me, wow. He says, this is not the Psalms. He spent his life studying the Psalms. He's a professor of the Psalms of David, which are du'as, essentially, du'as from the Christian tradition. Interestingly, we call Sahifa Sajadiyya Zabur Al Muhammad. It's the Psalms of Al Muhammad. It's one of the titles of Sahifa of Imam Zain al-Abidin. He looked at me and he says, it looks almost identical to the Zabur, to the Psalms. I said, no, this is from our first Imam. And he was floored. He's just like, this is absolutely, like he was speechless. He said, whoever has composed this, there is some divine connection here, because I've spent my entire life studying the Psalms of David, the prayers of the Hebrew Bible, of the previous prophets. And this basically summarizes the whole thing. This is one dua, Baba. One dua. Not sabah. This is one supplication in the state of sajda on the 15th of Sha'ban. This is not a myth. The Misbah al-Mutahajjid, I've written 300 pages on the history of it. It's not, it's manuscripts, all this. It's not some myth Shias have created. This is a strong textual heritage to this tradition. It's not a fantasy. But now I'll bring us to modernity. That same individual that will admit to the love of Ali and all of this, and crying for the children of Ali, no doubt we are all in the state of sadness of what happened to the daughters of Imam Ali, the son of Imam Ali, would recite Marsiya, not someone here I'm saying, but just in general, and recite Marsiya Noha. One of those individuals did something very strange to me recently. Not from here, it doesn't matter. He invited me to a wedding. Then he calls me 2 weeks later, he says, Sheikh, I'm really sorry. We don't need your services anymore. And I said, oh, Ajib, I've never been disinvited from something. I told him, let's just call him Zaid. I said, Zaid bhai, what is the issue? He says, Maulana, there's going to be live music. And I'm just like, acha. And it's just like an awkward silence on the phone with Zaid and me. And he's like, yeah, and you had, he's just stuttering on his words because it's a fahsha. He's committing a fahisha, and he's basically telling me not to come so you don't have to participate in the fahisha, in this guna kabira, right, that he's doing here. And he's one of our brothers from our general Shia community, Ithna Ashari community. Also from descendant of Banu Hashim. Now, that's not that that matters, but anyhow. And I just silently said, well, thank you very much for letting me know. Khuda Hafiz. And I didn't end up doing the nikah. I mean, how does one square both? This is my point. Rabbi zidni ilman. If we really ask Allah for knowledge, how do we square public fahisha, public display of total disregard for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Ahlul Bayt? Basically almost recreating the scene of Yazid's court without the alcohol. Isn't it? Yazid had the tabla and the dancers and the singing and all that, didn't he, right? This was Banu Abbas, Banu Umayyah, Sunnah of Banu Abbas, Banu Umayyah, right? Minus the alcohol, yes. And then you recite Marsiya. Scratching my head a little bit here. But hey, maybe I'm just the one who's a little bit off. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sometimes when we read this dua, Qul Rabbi Zidni Ilman, it means wake up from slumber. We are azadar of Imam Hussain, azadar of Ahlul Bayt. Ahlul Bayt expects more from us than that. I mean, this is the bare basic. We're not saying go become mujtahid. At least avoid open public fahisha and fahsha and munkar. If I got disinvited, why? That means there's why. Clearly the brother's ashamed of something, right? He's ashamed, he's embarrassed. Doesn't want the Maulana to be there. They would rather do the nikah privately at home quickly and then have the music party and whatever the, I don't know, whatever munkar is going to go on for that. Right? It's how does that work, right? And then what's so interesting is some individuals would say, but Maulana, I'm very spiritual. Huh? I read Ibn Arabi or Junaid or Bistami or Halaj, so on and so forth. I've studied all of this, of course. It's mysticism. I don't subscribe to it, but I studied it. I know its intellectual history. And my answer to them would be, Ibn Arabi would be rolling in his graves and doing a lanat on you if you took his name and did that. He was a faqih from Andalus. First understood the full Sharia before he went on tariqah and haqiqah, okay? He first understood Islamic law before taking the path towards other things. There's no leapfrogging. There's no such thing, I'm spiritual. No, it's not spiritual. That's fahisha and munkar. That is the opposite antithesis to spirituality. No Ibn Arabi or Ibn Sina or Mullah Sadra is going to save nobody now. And they would clearly do complete tabarra from such things. So I don't even know how people claim to be spiritual. Like again, you see, this is the whole lie of living of this secularism, right? This whole notion of being, I'm spiritual but not religious. What does that even mean? I don't even understand. In my 21 years of studying, still can't really grasp this. What does it mean I'm spiritual but I'm not religious? So I've got books of Rumi and Saadi and Hafiz and the Futuhat of Ibn Arabi and his Tarjuman al-Ashwaq and his various poems. But I'm not religious, being this hypothetical person. It is such idiocy. I don't even know where to begin with it. It is a complete logical fallacy. Not only that, it's intellectually dishonest. It's intellectually dishonest. These are people that represented a very profound and demanding spiritual path, which first required to stay away from huge displays of fisk and fasad in the earth at the very minimum. Not even talking about Salatul Layl and Tahajjud and Adhkar and الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ فِي السَّرَّةِ وَالضَّرَّةِ, the people that give nafaqah and charity even when they're in poverty. Right? وَكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظَ وَعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. These is high darajats. And they restrain their anger and they're forgiving of the people. وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. This is the maqam of ihsan. This is not maqam of ihsan. This is maqam of not being fasiq. Big thing. This is ihsan. This is big. We have to learn how to walk a little bit before we want to do marathons and run. Someone can't pray. They want to talk about these things. Or stay away from an environment that clearly the Messenger of Allah would not attend. That clearly if tomorrow you were to invite your marja, would he attend that gathering? No, absolutely not. That's the answer. So this is what I call false, pseudo, fraudulent intellectualism. It has nothing to do with Islam. And I'm not even saying this from the perspective of polemics. It is just straight up intellectually dishonest. Even if someone wasn't Muslim, they would say the same thing. It's a fact. Islam has a way of life. Someone could just admit and say, I'm not practicing, I'm not religious, and perhaps I'm not spiritual either. At least the person is honest. It's better to be honest and inshallah repent to Allah than to live in some kind of denial. Some kind of, state of complete dysfunctionality. Now imagine kids being raised in that environment, being taken to such parties. I spoke about this in Karachi, and I was told this is a very controversial topic. I think I chose the wrong place to speak about this. I was in Karachi not long ago, and I spoke about, someone came to me and said, Maulana, we don't discuss these issues, It's just, we were in the car, actually. Thank God it was an armored vehicle that we were in after. It was an armored vehicle. He turns to me, he says, Sheikhna, you really went for the jugular on that one, huh? I said, but it's in the Risala Amaliyah, it's just in Aga's Risala, it says haram. What do you, I'm not making, it's nothing controversial, it's just open the Marja's Risala, you know what's haram, what's halal, it's there. He says, yeah, but we don't really, come on. I'm like, what do you mean, come on? You're like, and I'm not picking on Karachi, it could be anywhere, it could be Toronto, it could be Tehran, it could be anywhere. That's just my particular example. I'm not picking on Pakistan. I love the Pakistani people. I have tons of friends in Karachi who would laugh at this, But the point is that, is that this kind of mentality, what do you mean, come on? Why does the Shia even feel uncomfortable? How can an Azadar of Hussein even feel uncomfortable? What was the Darbar of Yazid? Wasn't it that? What was the Darbar of Ibn Ziyad? Wasn't it that? What was the Darbar of Mansur and all of these Abbasid Khalifas, Khulafa? May Allah's lana to be upon them. Killers of Ahlul Bayt. Exactly that. Let me just share with you one example, and then I will conclude. This is a musibah, by the way. Mutawakkil. Do you know why he destroyed the grave of Imam Hussein? Abu Faraj al-Isfahani narrates a very interesting riwayah in Maqat al-Talibiyin, one of the earliest books written by the Zaydis, the Zaydis, about the death of all the Talibates. It's a very important work. In fact, I had a professor by the name of Dr. Sebastian Gunther, who was a German, who is now the chair at Göttingen, who wrote an entire PhD, I think in the early 90s, on the Maqatil of Abu Faraj al-Isfahani. Anyhow, very important work. Abu Faraj narrates here that one day Mutawakkil was missing his singer. He used to have singers in the court, right? The very same thing that some people have in their weddings. This, right? He had a live singer come. to do a sing and tabla and all the dancing and all the special, they had special dances prepared and all that, right? Kind of like what people do, this whole Shah Rukh Khan imitation stuff, right? Anyhow, so, right? They have me do the nikah outside though, quickly, and then they rush me out the door so they can begin this fisk and fasad in the earth. So they send me home, yeah. At least I get a kebab roll sometimes to go. So, so Mutawakkil, he's missing his singer. This is an actual, in the earliest history of Islam. Maqat al-Talibin is an extremely important source historically. So he's missing his singer. He's searching. He says, where's his singer? My favorite dancer and singer is missing. Right? Because he had them ready on the go, right? Various dancers and singers ready. He's missing. So he sends out a search party for her. He's the boss, Khalifa. He can do what he wants, right? Technically the most powerful man at that time on earth, probably, right? At the size of the Muslim empire. And he finds her eventually. Orders her to return to, at that time it would have been Samarra. Samarra or Baghdad, I don't remember if it already shifted. Probably Samarra. He asks her, where were you? She says, I was in Hajj. Looked at her and said, you're lying. This is not Dhul Hijjah. Wrong month, wrong. It's not Hajj. She put her head down. Kuntu azur al-Hussein alayhi salam. I had gone for the ziyarat of Hussein ibn Ali, and she never wanted to go back to that. He had her killed. And as a punishment to the Shias and Imam Hussein, he demolished the grave of Imam Hussein, because Imam Hussein's ziyarah took away his singing dance. And someone would want to have something like that in the nikah or party or home of the... Someone would dare? Imam Hussein's grave was demolished by Mutawakkil. According to the riwayah Abu al-Faraj al-Isfahani, Maqat al-Talibin, which is one of the earliest sources, I believe it even predates Tabari himself, because Mutawakkil lost his dancer to the ziyarat of Imam Hussein because she became reformed. Meaning the Imam is Babur Rahma wa Maghfirah. Imam is a door of mercy and forgiveness, brothers. Doesn't matter what we've done in our life. That's my message. Even if we, God forbid, someone here has done these parties or has gone, may Allah forgive you. Allah's mercy is vast. If even that woman who does such obscene things in the court of Mutawakkil finds her najat and salvation at the door of Hussein ibn Ali, then what about us? Azadara Hussein? Of course, inshallah. So he demolished the grave of Hussein, totally. And then, according to Tabari, this is in the Sunni literature, not even in the Shia literature totally, he then hired a special police force to imprison the visitors of Hussein. So what he did is he first demolished the grave. This is according to both Tabari and Abu al-Faraj al-Isfahani. He first, hadama qabr al-Hussein. He first did tahdeem of the qabr, so he just demolished it. Then he attempted to grow things over top of it, so it could be, its memory should be erased, he said. Then he diverted water to flood the entire area, so the water would flood over the grave, so it would be completely gone through a river. Right? So he diverted the water from the Euphrates to try to cover the grave of Imam Hussein. So basically to flood the whole area, so it's inapproachable. Of course it didn't work. It's Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. And then he set up a prison to take the Shia and the Zuwar one by one, a special prison just to torture the Zuwar of Imam Hussein. So they set up police checkpoints, kind of like Saddam, perhaps worse than Saddam, but like Saddam, like the time of Saddam Hussein, may Allah's lana to be upon him, to find the Shia visitors, Because they would just come one by one, quickly, and go. They couldn't even stay to do a proper ziyarat in those days. Ya Rasulullah. We read in the Ziyarat Nahiya, I'll share some lines with you tonight. Lam akun liman harabaka muhariban. Imam says that I was not there to fight those who fought you. Waliman nasaba laka al-adawata munasiban. And I was not there to show enmity to the one who showed enmity to you. Fala andumannaka sabahan wa masa'a. But now I shall mourn for you morning and night. Wala abkiyanna laka badala dumu'i dama. But my tears shall become tears of blood. And guess what, brothers and sisters? That's a real thing in Arabic. Do you know why? In Arabic it says that the one who loves, yani kathiru shawq wal ashq, yani al-dam yajri min aynay. That al-dam yajri min ayn. That blood runs from the eye of the one who is intensely in love. This is not an unknown thing. So the Imam is saying that he cries tears for blood for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. That's how much aza and gham and hum the Imam of the time is. To such an extent he says, Hasratan alayka wa ta'assufan ala ma dahak. That I'm in a state of grief. I'm in a state of calamity over you. Talahufan hatta amuta bilu'at al-musab. Until I am shaking so much with grief that I will die choking on my tears. Hatta amutu bilu'at al-musab. That my musibat is so much. I'm in such a state of palpitation, of a jaza and aza and hum and gham, that I'm going to die from this. It's as if I'm going to die from my gham. So no matter what azadari we do, it's never enough. It's never kafi. Because this is the aza of the Imam, and nobody can compete with the aza of Sahib al-Asri wal Zaman. And we read in the traditions, my dear brothers and sisters, As-salamu ala maqtu' al-watin, that peace be upon the one who had his jugular vein severed. As-salamu ala ra's al-marfu, peace be upon the head that was elevated off of its body. That we read in the traditions that when the Imam was killed, a crier called out from the throne of Allah in the way that the burning bush made a sound. And it said that today the Ummah has entered a state of darkness. That the moment Imam Hussein was executed, a crier was heard. That today the Muslim Ummah is now in a state of darkness. They have now entered a new epoch, a new era. La wafaqakum Allah la adha wa la fitr. That from this day, they will not have the tawfiq to enjoy Eid al-Adha and Fitr. That until the rising of the Qayem, Eid al-Adha and Fitr will not be a day of great enjoyment. Still a day, but it is missing two things. The Imam of our time and the revenge and the vengeance for the qatl of Imam Hussein. That this Muslim Ummah will be deprived of the true tawfiq of Adha and Fitr until we hear the cry from the heavens that our Imam of our time has come in and returned to us from the ghaibah. Hafil bin Hilal bin Nafi relates that I was with the infantry of Shimr when I heard Qutila al-Hussein, when I heard that Hussein has been killed. And he says, I kept thinking about how they killed him and how they killed him. He says, I kept thinking that he begged for water over and over again. And I heard a man telling him, Hussein, you will not have a sip until you taste the water of hell. Can you imagine? Hilal says that after I heard the cry of Hussein, this story kept ringing in my head. Hussein begging for water, asking for water, and being told that Hussein, wait, you will taste, na'udhu billah, the water of hell. Can you imagine this is how they killed Imam Hussein alayhi salam? This was the level of torture and barbarity. And then Khawarizmi says, a red dust storm began. He says, we had never seen a storm like this before. It was red. It was everywhere. It was as if something cosmic had occurred now. And all of us were scared. And they started thinking to themselves, what have we done? What have we done? And he says, one of the infantry soldiers says, I came out to see the body. And of course, the body is without a head. And he says, this is narrated in Sunni and Shia texts, that all I saw was nur coming out from the neck of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. It was like a pillar of light from his neck to the heavens. Because his neck was, of course, without the ra's. That's why we say, Salamu ala ra'sil marfu, peace be upon the head that is not on the body. He says, I saw light. It was something, he said, it was like something we have never seen before. And then we read in Ziyarat Nahiya, وَقَامَ نَعِيكَ إِنْ قَبْرِ جَدِّكَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. And then the messenger of death comes to the grave of Rasulullah in Medina. فَنَعَاكَ إِلَيْكَ بِدَمْعِ الْخُتُولِ. And he begins to cry with a river of tears in front of the grave of Rasulullah. قَالَ قَائِلًا يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ قُتِلَ سِبْتُكَ وَفَتَاكَ. That, O Rasulullah, this is in Ziyarat Nahiya of Sahib al-Zaman, that, O Rasulullah, your son has been killed now. Kutila sibtuka wa fatah. Can you imagine who is coming to the grave of Rasulullah? Who? Jibreel. Jibreel perhaps coming to the qabr of Rasulullah to give the news. The official, you know, when someone dies, you have to come to give them official condolences. Who will give condolences to Rasulullah? His companion Jibreel, inshallah. And says, Kutila sibtuka wa fatak wa subya. Ba'dik dhararik. And we have one more piece of news for you, Ya Rasulullah. Your family and your girls have been taken as prisoners. وَفُجِعَتْ وَاسْتُبِحَ أَهْلُكَ وَهِمَاكَ. Not only that, and your family have been made halal now. From the word ibaha, ustubiha. Arabic is a very deep language, brothers. I think that you guys, for those who know Arabic, the language is very good, very hard here. Ustubiha ahluka wa himak. That what was haram has been made halal now. Meaning it is haram to see the women without the covering. But they decided to make it halal for them, Zainab to be halal, Sakina to be halal, Fatima bint Hussein to be halal, in the sense of seeing them without the outer covering. That's all. Nothing, of course, more than that. Ustubiha ahluka. What does this mean, ustubi? Brothers, this is a profound words of Sahib al-Zaman. Ustubiha ahluka wa himak. That they made some to make it mubah. This is the importance of hijab, of covering, of modesty. And then it concludes by saying, وَوَقَعَ الْمَحْذُورُ بِعْتْرَتِكَ وَذَوِيكَ. And then the Prophet enters into heart palpitations. Mahdhur, like he is the Prophet is terrified. Mahdhur, like he's in a state of complete terror hearing this, the news that has come to him about his grandson. فَأَنْزَعَجَ رَسُولُ وَبَكَى كَلْبَهُ الْمَهُولِ. And then it says, the Rasul didn't cry. His heart cried. Do you know how much more significant that is? Baka kalbahu. The heart of the Messenger of Allah began to cry. وَعَزَاهُ بِكَ الْمَلَائِكَةُ وَالْأَنْبِيَاءُ. And the angels began to come to give their azah. One by one, the angels began to come. They gave their condolences to Amir al-Mu'mineen. And then we are left with Fatima al-Zahra. And I'll just end on this. وَفُجِعَتْ بِكَ أُمَّكَ الزَّهْرَةُ. And O Imam Hussein, Ya Hussein ibn Ali, and your mother was in a state of fuj'a. Fuj'a is like when you hear your 3-year-olds, like if any of you heard that your child dies, that is the fuj'a in Arabic. It is an undescribable grief. explosive grief, like a kind that you will just collapse from this grief. فُجِعَتْ بِكَ أُمَّكَ الزَّهْرَاء. This is the gham and the hum of Fatima Zahra alayhi salam. على لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين ماتم حسين.